and Allah made it in the last 10 so you could prepare yourself in the first 20. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine if Laylatul Qadr was in the first 10 of Ramadan, where your body's still getting used to fasting, where the first few nights of Taraweeh, they feel very difficult because your legs aren't used to it, your back's not used to it. You know, think of Sha'ban to Ramadan. Sha'ban is a time in which you can fast, in which you get yourself ready for Ramadan, right? You prepare yourself for Ramadan. And if you fast a lot in Sha'ban, then your body is ready so that the first few days of fasting in Ramadan are not difficult because there isn't much of an adjustment in terms of the bodily nature of fasting. Think of the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal in giving us the first 20 days to get our sleep schedules right, to get our bodies right, to make fasting so normal and natural to us, to get us used to Taraweeh prayer, which is just qiyam, right? In the masjid or even at home. And Allah Azza wa Jal put it in those last 10, so now we're fully prepared to reap the spiritual rewards. Bidhnillahi ta'ala. So the discussion becomes then, when is Laylatul Qadr? Multiple opinions, as you can imagine. There's one opinion from Ikramah, where he said it was the 15th of Sha'ban. And this is of course wrong because Allah Azza wa Jalla said, شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ فِيهِ الْقُرْآنِ, right? And إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةِ الْقَدْرِ. So it has to be in Ramadan. You have the opinion of Imam bin Hazm rahimahullah ta'ala, who mentions it in the beginning of the first 10, so the 20th or the 21st. You have the opinion of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri and Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, the early opinion that mentions it as the 23rd night of Ramadan. You have an opinion of Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, that's the 24th or the 25th night of Ramadan. And then you have the opinion of Ubay ibn Ka'ab, the later opinion of Ibn Abbas, and many other scholars who say that it's the 27th night of Ramadan. And they have their evidences for that. And then you have other scholars who say that every year it changes to a different night, with it being more likely in the odd nights. Again, we have an article that goes through all of these opinions and how they were justified. And Imam an-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions in his commentary of the hadith of Sahih Muslim that this is the best way to harmonize the ahadith, is that it can change from year to year. That it could be on the 23rd one year, and then it could be on the 25th the next year, it could be the 27th the year after that. So it moves within the last 10 nights of Ramadan. That is the opinion of a great majority, or not a great majority, but of many of the scholars of Islam. And it's the one that allows us to strive most throughout the last 10 nights. There's a weak narration that if an odd night coincides with Laylatul Jum'ah, and I mention this because we hear it every year, with the night of Friday, which would technically be Thursday night, then that's more likely to be Laylatul Qadr. Imam bin Rajab rahimahullah mentions this in Lata'if al-Ma'arif, but there isn't a solid proof of this. So could it be that because the night of Friday, which is a blessed night, if it coincides with an odd night of Ramadan, that it's that? Allahu A'lam. It could indeed be that there's a greater likelihood, but still, are you going to miss out on the other nights as a result of it? Imam al-Razi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that Allah did not tell you when Laylatul Qadr is, or it was not conveyed to us through the Prophet ﷺ, because He didn't want people to fall into sin. Because if you knew what exact night it was and you missed it, then think about how sinful you would be. Like if you knew it was one night of the year and you still didn't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that night, then think about how sinful you would be. Now there is this narration where Abu Salama radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that انطلقت إلى أبي سعيد الخدري radiallahu ta'ala anhu. I went to Abu Sa'id radiallahu ta'ala anhu and I said, will you not go out and take a walk with us in the garden so that we can talk to you? So he came out and I asked him, what have you heard from the Prophet ﷺ about Laylatul Qadr? And he said that the Prophet ﷺ made i'tikaf for the first 10 nights of Ramadan. This is really interesting. And then Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he said to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, "Inna ladhi tatlubu amamak," that which you are seeking is still ahead of you. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam stood up on the 10th, and he said sallallahu alayhi wasallam that Jibreel alayhi salam came to me and he told me that which is or sought is still ahead of you. So we stayed with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam for another 10, and then on the 20th, Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he said to him again, Inna ladhi tatlubu amamak, that verily that which you seek is still ahead of you. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that on the 20th of Ramadan. He said, Man kana i'takafa ma'a nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam falyarji', whoever was doing i'tikaf with the Prophet ﷺ, come back to the masjid. And he says, فَإِنِّي أُرِيتُ لَيْلَةَ الْقَدْرِ. He said, I saw Laylatul Qadr, وَإِنِّي نُسِّيتُهَا. I was caused to forget the exact night. And he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that it is fil ashr al-awakhir, it is from the last 10. And he said, wa fi witrin, and it is one of the odd of the last 10. And he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wa inni ra'aytu ka'anni asjudu fi tinin wa ma. I see myself as if I'm making sujood in mud and in water. So basically, that whatever that night's going to be in the last 10, I saw a vision of what it looks like, a dream, that I'm making sujood in mud and in water. And it was that year that on the 23rd night, there was rain, and it was a beautiful rain. And subhanAllah, there was no trace, Abu Sa'id radiallahu anhu says, there was no trace of clouds in the sky. And then suddenly, a cloud came right over us. And I remember this, subhanAllah, in 2019.